Hi, my name is Helena Medin, and I'm the community manager here at Trada. Welcome to our series, Ask Me Almost Anything. As the name suggests, we get to invite some of the most dynamic names in the industry to join us for an exclusive interview where we get to chat about almost anything. We've got our own questions, of course, and even more submitted by you, Trada community members. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with co-founder and CTO of HyperComply, Cody Wright. HyperComply is a third-party risk management platform that automates security reviews and due diligence processes. Cody, we're so happy to have you here with us. You've had quite an interesting journey professionally, from software engineering and development to founding HyperComply. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you ended up starting your company?
Absolutely. Yeah, great to be here. So I'm Cody, co-founder and CTO here at HyperComply. My journey on the way to HyperComply is via software engineering generally. So early on, I worked at a company called Vidyard, where I owned the customer analytics platform. So I was kind of the guy who knew how all the customer data was actually stored at Vidyard. And so as a result, as we started getting early security questionnaires, I was often the go-to in terms of like, where is this data and how is it stored and all that kind of stuff. So I got to see how a small organization dealt with the increase in security questionnaires as it went up market. And then after that, I worked at SeatGeek, where I was a tech lead on the enterprise team there, and saw kind of the other side of that, which is maybe like a 250 to 300 person company getting 1,000 to 2,000 question RFPs from massive clients that are working with the Dallas Cowboys and New Orleans Saints and really big teams. And so we would see those questionnaires come in and then see like 40 software engineers jump in a spreadsheet and try and help solve all those questions and trying to figure out who knew which data and all that kind of stuff. And so as a software engineer, it was a clear opportunity for something that could be better because you're used to automating things all day, and then you see all these folks jumping in these spreadsheets and trying copy and pasting from other RFPs and all that kind of stuff. So that was our main goal at the start, was just provide a central knowledge base for this information and then provide some automation so that you don't actually have to sit there copy pasting these results across separate questionnaires.
That's a great solution and a really interesting journey, but actually makes a lot of sense. Um, so our next question is, in a world of security technology companies where many try to focus on solving hundreds of things at once, what is the idea behind mastering security questionnaires in particular?
Yeah, so I think it's, when we started the company, we could see security questionnaires are a big problem, and there's two big drivers behind them. So one is the mass adoption of SOC 2, which Trada knows well. And so once you're SOC 2 compliant, you need to be either collecting those SOC 2 reports, or if you can't, you need to be sending a questionnaire. And so as a result, there's a lot more security questionnaires going around the ecosystem. And then from the building side, what's been really cool is watching the advent of modern machine learning models, especially around the NLP models. So transformer networks like BERT that came out around when we were founding the company allow us to use machine learning to do better question-to-question matching than you would have done even 5 years ago. And together, that just gives us a great opportunity to build a business. We've actually now entered the other side as well, so sending questionnaires as well as receiving them. But generally, we really like this space of security questionnaires and compliance in general as a spot and a niche for us.
Yeah, definitely. And we also know that unfortunately, some providers try and outsource the task of these security questionnaires to other organizations, but sometimes they're not, familiar with the inner workings of security or the company. So I'd be curious to know, what are your thoughts on this, and how do you differentiate and stay ahead?
Yeah, 100%. I think what's really interesting about watching this solution space grow as we found the company, we've been around for about 3.5 years, is we've seen our early customers' security postures change. They change pretty often as they get new certifications, or maybe they open a new office location, they launch a new service in Europe, and so that changes their answers. So there's a real challenge around providing up-to-date, accurate answers to your customers when they ask for these different checkboxes. So outsourcing that is really hard. It's already hard enough to keep that information in sync inside of your org, but once you have an external contractor trying to do that for you, really difficult. So what we do at HyperComply is we give you the tools to curate and maintain that knowledge. We help with what I was talking about before, which is kind of the grunt work of what you would be doing, like copy pasting those questions. But ultimately, we're still giving the ownership to you in terms of managing that data, because I don't think that it can really work any other way.
Yeah, that's excellent and really interesting how you differentiate yourself in this space. Um, we've got a lot of buzzwords in our industry. I'm relatively new to cybersecurity and compliance, so I'm learning as I go. But one thing that I do know is AI. How does HyperComply fight through incorrect uses of AI and empower your users?
Yeah, 100%. So I would say we're really more using machine learning than AI directly.
Mhm.
And as I hinted at it earlier, but really the main thing we're using machine learning for is matching question to question. So part of the key insight of hypercomply is there's actually really only like 100 to 200 distinct questions that actually get asked in these security questionnaires, but they get asked in a bunch of subtly different ways, which make it really hard. So you can't just say like, I'm only going to match these exact match questions that I've seen before. They're going to be slightly different. So what the machine learning model helps us do is it helps us give an accuracy or a confidence score when we're trying to match two questions. We say, like, oh, like these are 99% the same, the answer is going to work. Whereas if it's like, oh, these are 80% the same, then that's, we're going to need some more human review there and to find the right answer. So that's the main use. I mean, really, we're much more than an ML tool. One of our core value props is reducing time in responding to these questionnaires, but ML is just one part of that.
Mhm.
It's also workflow tools and centralized knowledge base and generally just trying to give you a better process around responding to questionnaires. Because I think that's a big thing that's generally missing in organizations. It's, you're searching through these Google Drive folders and you're trying to find the answer, and it can be really difficult to get the answer there. So having one centralized place where you're keeping all this information up to date, it can be really powerful.
Yeah, yeah, it's just streamlining the process and having a layered response. Um, okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit, not so much a question about your product. I'm interested in learning about the timing of questionnaires and how we should prepare for them. And let me actually clarify, this question was submitted by a Drata community member. And so all of our questions moving forward are directly from the community. So they're going to be all over the place.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I think depending on the type of customer you sell to, you're going to
Mhm.
get those questionnaires at different parts of the cycle. Also,
Mhm.
security questionnaires can often be a subset of an RFP. So you get an RFP right at the beginning of the process. Generally, the questionnaire is a good sign. Like they wouldn't be sending you the questionnaire if they didn't think that you were a viable option. But if it's an RFP, obviously that's you can't really like treat that as a done deal. Whereas if you've already had a few deals and now there are a few conversations and now they're sending a questionnaire, generally that's going to be a really strong vote of confidence in terms of like this deal is progressing in the right direction. Um, in terms of preparing for the questionnaires, I think the big thing is trying to preempt them. So going to the customer and asking for them earlier can be really good. And then as an organization, if you just have a couple of the big templates, which we offer to our customers, so like the SIG Light or the Cake, if you go through the exercise of completing those, you'll be ready for the type of questions that come in from customers. Because if you're doing it for the first time in the middle of a deal flow, it's going to take you a few days and that's going to slow down your deal cycle. And it's, you're trying to get these things back to the customer as quickly as possible.
Great, great. Our next question is also from a Drata community member. They'd like to know, is getting a questionnaire a potential indicator of where you are in a deal? Say, for example, a company may be evaluating another SaaS platform, but have not yet said they were out of the running.
Um, yeah, so I think it goes back to my last answer. Actually, I think that it really does depend on the type of deal and whether this is an RFP. But generally, again, like if you're getting the questionnaire, it's a good sign for your deal. Like they wouldn't be sending it to you if they didn't think that you were a viable option.
Okay, great. That's a good rule of thumb. All right, next. How much time would you say is saved by using AI? And I know you touched on this a bit too, versus having a running list of questions and answers and updating it occasionally.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things there. Having the running list of question answers is super powerful, and I think that's also the basis in hypercomply is you want to have that source knowledge. But if you have just a list of single question and answer pairs, there's a couple of issues. One is someone's going to have to do the grunt work of copy pasting, which is always annoying and can be it's error prone as well.
Mm.
The other thing is you need someone who really understands the question to be able to do that mapping. So like if you see a new question come in and it's similar but not exactly the same to what you had in your reference documentation, you need to understand the underlying security kind of implications of a question to be able to say, oh, the answer we gave here is right, or maybe it's slightly different, so it doesn't make sense. So to do that, that means that you're going to have someone who's, pretty well versed in security responding to the questionnaire. Maybe you have an engineer doing it, or even your CTO, depending on your size. And that's expensive time. And so I think that's the big thing is we can help with is we can get the really time consuming process done here and just let you review the answers instead of having to go out and find all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, this is a good segue too. What are the repercussions of providing an answer that a vendor doesn't like? There's a further comment here. I've only been through this twice and I never got feedback. For added context, let's hone in on this life or death deal.
Yeah, 100%. So I think there's a couple things you can do. I think first of all, it's worth noting that especially on the larger questionnaires, it's often not the case that you're going to be the answer the customer wants every time. Like there are going to be differences in your security posture. Like they may have, and some of the questions are more aspirational, like nice to haves than need to have. So if you see a question and you're worried that you're going to be out of compliance, you can always reach out to the customer. Like you don't have to give them the answer in the document and just plop it back at them. You can reach out and be like, hey, saw this question, wanted to explain our posture. Maybe you can get on the phone with someone on the compliance side of the customer and try and preempt that. But at the same time, you're going to be saying no on some of these answers, and you'll just have to give a good justification. And going through those templates early on in the company can help with that because you'll have already flagged where you're like, oh, we're not going to nail this question. We're working towards it, and here's the deadline.
Getting in front of it. Okay, next question is, over the years, I've worked with startups and enterprise companies. This person has a background in the Department of Defense. As a threat intelligence analyst, what is the best way to support due diligence efforts? I'll occasionally get questions about the state of our security, etc., but it's not routine.
Yeah, so part of what we try and do at HyperComply is we try and keep the subject matter experts, which I assume is kind of where this person sits, out of the response flow. They may need to, like if someone's synthesizing a new answer, they may need to review it. But the idea is that subject matter expert is coming in and curating the knowledge so that when the questionnaire comes in, someone else can use their pre-written answer instead of having to involve them on every questionnaire. Because depending on your flow, like you might be getting 15 or 20 of these questionnaires a month. If that SME is spending doing 20 responses every month, that's going to take up a significant amount of their time. Sometimes it's necessary, it depends on the deal, but yeah, generally I think it's just having that person assigned to reference knowledge that they can come in every quarter and make sure is still up to date so that other people can take off the grunt work of actually getting the questionnaires out. The other benefit, especially in HyperComply, within the context of HyperComply, is we also provide a search interface on top of the data. So not only is this data important when you're responding to a questionnaire, but it's also really important in terms of maybe your AE is on a phone call with the customer, or maybe they get an email and they need to respond with an answer of like, where's your data residency or something like that. Having that data available via search is also going to save everyone time instead of having to like go into Slack, find out who knows the answer to this, go talk to that person. It might take a day to get back to the customer. Whereas if you have it searchable in your knowledge base, you could get back to them in a couple of minutes.
Let's go to this last question. I work for a small startup, 6 people. We have a SaaS tool and I expect we may get these security questions in the future. Do you have any advice for our small team as we officially don't have any official security person? I'm IT and an engineer for context.
Yeah, 100%. So I think for any company, you're going to need to have one person who takes the lead on responding to these security questionnaires and develops your posture. So if you don't have someone who is fluent in security and understands the implication of having the correct security posture, you're going to need to go out and hire that person. But assuming you have someone on the team who can take that lead, going through your SOC 2 or ISO with our friend Strada can be a really powerful thing to do. Because the fact is that SOC 2, depending on your customer, the SOC 2 doesn't deflect the questionnaires necessarily, but it means that you have all the right answers. So most of the questions you're going to get are around, do you have a policy for this? Or, what interval do you review a policy or a setting or backups or any of that kind of stuff? So going through the process of getting one of these compliance certifications, even if you're not necessarily required to do so, will mean that you're totally prepared to start responding to these questionnaires, and have good answers. Like, you won't be able to get there without having the right answers. And then, as I mentioned earlier, even before that, just trying to complete a cake or a SIG for yourself and just see, okay, like, either we don't know what the answer to this is, in which case you should go figure it out, or we know the answer, but it's not going to be a yes, and so then you have to prioritize that and be like, okay, maybe we do need to, for instance, maybe for some reason you're not encrypting all your data at rest. Like, okay, that's a task that you can go out and do over the next month. Make sure that you're in the correct policy, because the questions are coming in from these questionnaires and from SOC 2 are the type of things that your customers are going to expect you to have. And the more upmarket you go, the more enterprise you go, the more that's just going to be table stakes on your deal.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, our last question. Is it common for questionnaires to be sent even with something like a SOC 2 type 2?
Yeah, so I guess similar to what I was saying before, we don't see SOC 2 as necessarily getting rid of all security questionnaires. You can definitely deflect some of them by early on the deal cycle. If you preempt the questionnaire by sending your SOC 2, it should help. But the bigger the org is that you're selling to, the more likely it is that they're going to have their very specific set of questions that they need you to answer. And they may not all be answered in your SOC 2 report. So I think the big thing is when you go through your SOC 2, you're going to have the right answers for the questions that come in on these security questionnaires. And that's hugely beneficial. I mean, that's really the exercise, is making sure that you're compliant with whatever the customer needs. So no, the SOC 2 doesn't get rid of all security questionnaires, but it definitely helps, both in terms of volume and also in terms of having the right answers.
Okay, great. Great. Thank you so much, Cody. I don't have any more questions for you, but I would love if you have anything to share with us that you think any of our users might want to know, either about yourself or HyperComply. We'd love to hear it, and we really appreciate your time today.
Great. Yeah, thanks. It's been super fun being on with you. Yeah, I think the big thing on HyperComply, as I said, I think we go very well with something like Drata, where we can value add on top of the data you already have. We'll be launching an integration over the next few months that'll be able to pull in your Drata data into HyperComply and allow you to respond, basically allow you to curate that knowledge a little bit better, more automatically. But yeah, we're Drata customers. It's been a great ride with you guys.
Yeah, you're an excellent partner too, and we loved learning a little bit more about you. I'm sure we'll be doing a follow-up interview with more questions. And if you're a community member and you've enjoyed today's conversation, let's continue it. And please feel free to add your comments, questions below, and we'll see if we can get Cody back to answer a few more questions later on. So thank you again. We really, really appreciated it, and we learned a lot.